Love does not always arrive as excitement. Sometimes it arrives quietly, without promises, without certainty, without a clear future. And this story begins there. They met during a season when life felt unfinished, not broken. Just incomplete. Neither of them had everything figured out, and neither of them pretended to. That honesty mattered more than they realized at the time. He was building something slowly, not a dream people applauded, not a path others understood. Just a direction he believed in, even when progress felt invisible. His days were long, often repetitive. He worked, returned home tired, and questioned whether the effort would ever turn into stability. He rarely spoke about those doubts. She noticed them anyway, not through words but through pauses, through the way his shoulders carried the weight of uncertainty. She never asked him to explain his plans, never asked how long it would take. She understood something most people overlook. Pressure does not speed up growth. Their relationship was simple at the beginning, conversations without expectations, time shared without urgency. They did not rush to define what they were building together. They allowed it to exist as it was. Love, in those early days, felt light, not because life was easy, but because neither of them demanded answers from the other. As time passed, reality grew heavier. Bills arrived, responsibilities increased, life demanded clarity. He felt that pressure deeply, not just as an individual, but as someone who cared about another person's future. There were moments when doubt grew louder, moments when he wondered if love deserved something more certain than patience. He considered walking away once, not because he didn't care, but because he feared slowing her down. She sensed the distance before he spoke, and when he finally did, she listened without interruption. She did not reassure him with promises. She did not say everything would work out. Instead, she said something quieter. She said she believed in effort over timelines. That moment changed the shape of their love. Love stopped being a feeling. It became a choice. Support does not always look like encouragement. Sometimes it looks like staying calm when the other person feels unsure. She did not push him to succeed faster. She adjusted expectations instead. They began building life around reality, not fantasy. Smaller plans, clearer priorities. He noticed the difference slowly. He worked with less anxiety, less urgency, not because the future was secure, but because the present felt supported. Support created space, and space allowed him to think clearly. Love stopped asking, "When will you arrive?" Love started asking, "How can I walk with you while you're becoming?" There were setbacks, unexpected expenses, delays, moments when progress seemed to reverse. Each time he expected frustration. Each time she responded with steadiness. Not silence, steadiness. She never compared their journey to others. She did not measure their life against someone else's timeline. She measured it against honesty. That mattered. He began to change in ways that had nothing to do with success. He became more consistent, more focused, less distracted by what others were achieving. Support removed the noise, and in that quiet, motivation returned naturally. He worked with purpose now, not to prove himself, but to honor the trust placed in him. Trust is a powerful responsibility. It does not demand perfection. It demands sincerity. Love had not accelerated his journey. It had stabilized it. They learned how to wait together, not passively, but with intention. Waiting did not mean doing nothing. It meant doing what could be done today without resenting tomorrow. Their bond deepened quietly. Not through grand moments, through ordinary days. Ordinary days reveal character. They reveal patience. They reveal priorities. She never asked him to become someone else. She asked him to remain honest. That request carried weight. Because honesty is harder than ambition. As months turned into years, life slowly shifted, not dramatically. Gradually, stability appeared in small ways, fewer worries, clearer plans. People began to notice their connection, calling it strong. Calling it rare. They did not see the early uncertainty. They did not see the waiting. They did not see the moments when love chose patience over fear. He understood something important now. Love does not motivate by pressure. It motivates by presence. Presence builds confidence. Confidence fuels effort. Effort shapes the future. This was only the beginning of what support would demand, because love does not stop supporting once progress appears. Support is tested most when growth introduces new challenges, and that lesson was still ahead of them. Support is easy when life is calm. The real test begins when pressure arrives quietly and refuses to leave. As their life moved forward, responsibility grew heavier, not suddenly, gradually. What once felt manageable now demanded consistency. Bills arrived on time. Work demanded more focus. Energy felt limited. He carried that weight silently, not because he wanted to hide it, but because he didn't want it to become her burden. Love had given him stability. Now stability demanded effort. There were nights when exhaustion followed him home. Not physical tiredness alone, but mental fatigue, the kind that questions purpose. He worried about disappointing her, not with failure, but with delay. Delay is difficult to explain. It does not feel like progress. It feels like standing still while time moves forward. She noticed the change in him. Less conversation, more silence. Not distance, but distraction. Support does not always mean speaking. Sometimes it means observing carefully before responding. She did not confront him immediately. She waited. Waiting gave her clarity. She understood that his silence was not withdrawal. It was pressure searching for balance. When she finally spoke, she chose her words carefully, not to motivate, not to reassure, but to understand. She asked him how the days felt now, not how progress looked. That question opened something. He spoke honestly for the first time without filtering concern. He talked about uncertainty, about feeling responsible for a future he could not yet guarantee. She listened without correction, without advice. Listening is a form of support few people master. She did not offer solutions. She offered perspective. She reminded him that responsibility grows before results, that it was not a sign of failure. It was a sign of commitment. Commitment changes how effort feels. Effort becomes heavier but more meaningful. She told him something simple. She said she trusted direction more than speed. That sentence stayed with him. Speed creates urgency. Direction creates confidence. He returned to his work differently after that. Not energized, grounded. Grounded effort lasts longer than motivated effort. There were still difficult days. Support does not remove difficulty. It changes how difficulty is carried. He learned to pace himself, not to rush progress, not to avoid rest. They adjusted their expectations together. Plans became more realistic. Goals became flexible. Flexibility protected their connection. Love stopped being an emotional anchor alone. It became a practical partnership. They learned how to solve problems calmly, not immediately, but thoughtfully. There were disagreements. Support does not eliminate conflict. It teaches how to move through it without damage. They chose understanding over winning. They chose patience over pride. He noticed how that choice affected him. He felt less defensive, less pressured to perform. Support removed the fear of judgment. Fear had been draining him quietly. Without fear, effort felt cleaner. He focused on improvement instead of comparison. He stopped measuring his progress against others. Love had given him permission to move at his own pace. That permission carried responsibility. He could no longer blame pressure. He had to honor trust. Trust sharpened his discipline, not through fear but through respect. He worked steadily now. With intention, she noticed the change, not in results, in attitude. Confidence returned slowly, not the loud kind, the quiet kind that does not need reassurance. They celebrated small stability, not milestones, moments of calm. Support does not always feel inspiring. Sometimes it feels repetitive, but repetition builds reliability. Reliability builds security. As time passed, life remained imperfect, but it became predictable. Predictability reduced anxiety. Reduced anxiety improved focus. Support created a cycle of growth. He understood something new now. Love does not push you forward. It holds you steady so you don't fall backward. That steadiness mattered when new challenges appeared, because growth invites responsibility. Responsibility tests support, and the next phase of their journey would demand more than patience. It would demand trust during visible change. Support would be tested not by struggle, but by progress, because progress introduces new pressures, new expectations, new decisions, and love would need to adapt again. Growth rarely arrives loudly. It shows up in small changes first. A little more confidence, a little more clarity, a little less fear. He noticed those changes slowly, not in achievements, but in how he approached his days. Work no longer felt like a race. It felt like a responsibility he could manage with intention. Support had created stability. Stability created focus. Focus began shaping results. Opportunities appeared quietly, not dramatic breakthroughs. Just chances that required preparation. Preparation mattered now more than effort alone, and preparation demands consistency. He approached growth carefully, not rushing forward, not holding back. Love changed its role again during this phase. Earlier, it had been reassurance. Now, it became grounding. She reminded him to remain patient even when momentum increased. Growth can create pressure just as easily as struggle. Pressure whispered new fears, fear of losing balance, fear of disappointing expectations. Expectations came from outside now. People noticed his progress. They asked questions. They offered opinions. Attention altered the environment. The quiet space they had protected felt smaller. Support adapted. She encouraged boundaries, not isolation. Boundaries. Boundaries protect growth without suffocating it. He learned to say no, not defensively, deliberately. Deliberate choices preserved consistency. Consistency preserved trust. Trust now extended beyond their relationship. Others relied on him. Responsibility multiplied, not suddenly, gradually. He felt the weight again. But this time it did not overwhelm him. Support had strengthened his capacity. He knew how to pace himself now. Love did not push him harder. It reminded him to remain aligned. Alignment mattered more than speed. Speed without alignment creates burnout. Burnout damages relationships before it damages results. They talked more during this phase, not about dreams, about decisions. Decisions define growth more than ambition. They discussed priorities calmly, what to accept, what to postpone, what to decline. Support became strategic, not emotional reassurance alone, practical understanding. He noticed how rare that was. Many relationships celebrate success without considering its cost. She considered the cost carefully. Energy, time, presence. Presence remained important to her, not perfection. He respected that deeply. Growth tested identity. He was no longer the uncertain person he had been, but he was not finished either. Love helped him navigate that transition, without pressure to become someone else. She reminded him that growth does not require reinvention. It requires refinement. Refinement is slower than change, but it lasts longer. He refined habits, refined routines, refined expectations. He became more selective, less reactive. Success had not arrived fully, but direction had strengthened. Direction gave confidence without arrogance. He trusted himself more now, not blindly, through experience. Support had not removed doubt entirely. It had taught him how to move forward with it. Doubt became a signal, not an obstacle. They faced decisions together now, not emotionally, practically. That partnership strengthened their bond. Love matured. Maturity does not remove emotion. It stabilizes it. He noticed something else. Support changed how he viewed love itself. Love was no longer escape. It was foundation. A foundation supports weight. It does not avoid it. Weight increased as growth continued. New responsibilities appeared. Support adjusted again. She encouraged rest, encouraged perspective. Perspective prevented overwhelm. They learned to pause intentionally. Pauses prevented resentment. Resentment grows when effort feels unseen. She never let effort go unnoticed. Not with praise, with acknowledgement. Acknowledgement feels different from validation. It respects reality. He felt seen without feeling pressured. That balance allowed growth without sacrificing connection. Others admired their relationship now, calling it strong, calling it balanced. They did not see the work behind it. Support requires awareness. Awareness requires effort. Growth continued, quietly. They did not rush celebration. They remained focused. Love had become something dependable, not exciting in appearance, reliable in function. Reliability creates freedom, freedom to grow without fear. He understood now that love did not motivate him to succeed. It allowed him to succeed sustainably. Sustainability would soon be tested, because success, when it arrives clearly, demands restraint, and restraint would challenge support in new ways. The next phase would ask a difficult question. Could love remain steady when life accelerated? Success rarely announces itself clearly. At first, it feels like relief. Then it becomes responsibility, and responsibility changes everything. Progress finally became visible, not dramatic, noticeable, work stabilized. Opportunities became more consistent. Life felt less uncertain. With stability came new expectations, from others, from circumstances, from himself. He felt that pressure immediately. Earlier, uncertainty had been the weight. Now maintenance became the challenge. Maintaining progress requires discipline. Maintaining balance requires restraint. Love entered another phase quietly. Earlier, it had provided patience. Now, it offered perspective. Perspective prevents growth from becoming obsession. People began to ask more questions. They wanted advice. They wanted insight. They wanted results. Attention changed how his days felt. Less privacy, more decisions. Support adjusted again. She noticed how easily momentum could become overload. She reminded him that success should not erase boundaries. Boundaries protect both growth and relationships. He struggled with this at first. Saying no felt like rejection. But saying yes to everything created exhaustion. Love helped him prioritize, not emotionally, logically. They revisited routines together. What worked before needed refinement now. Growth demands revision. What supports one phase may strain another. He learned to slow down intentionally, not to resist progress, to manage it. Managing success requires self-awareness. Awareness grows when support remains honest. She was honest with him. Not critical, clear. She pointed out when work invaded rest, when urgency replaced intention. Her honesty was not confrontation, it was protection. Protection allowed sustainability. He noticed how success tested ego, not loudly. Quietly, recognition invites temptation. Temptation to rush, to expand too quickly. Support grounded him. She reminded him that speed could undo stability. He trusted that guidance. Trust had been built long before success. They protected simple routines, shared meals, quiet conversations. Consistency in small things preserved connection. Connection mattered more now because growth creates distance if left unchecked. They stayed intentional, not rigid. Flexibility kept resentment from forming. He accepted something difficult. Success did not reduce effort, it redistributed it. Energy had to be managed carefully. Burnout does not announce itself early. Support prevented burnout by noticing patterns before damage. She encouraged rest without guilt. Rest without guilt restores clarity. Clarity improved decisions. Decisions protected growth. They learned to celebrate quietly. Not achievements, stability. Stability is often overlooked, but it sustains success longer than excitement. He felt gratitude now, not for outcomes alone, for the support that shaped how outcomes were handled. Love had evolved fully. From patience to partnership to protection, protection does not limit growth, it preserves it. They face challenges still. Success does not remove difficulty, it introduces complexity. Complexity requires communication. They practiced that consistently. They spoke openly about fatigue, about limits, about priorities. That openness prevented misunderstanding. Misunderstanding erodes support faster than failure. Love had learned to respond, not react. He noticed how rare that was. Many relationships struggle not with hardship, but with change. Change tests adaptability. Support must evolve or break. Their support evolved, because it was built on awareness, not expectation. He realized something profound. Love had not followed his journey. It had shaped how the journey unfolded. That realization brought calm. They were no longer building separately. They were navigating together. Navigation requires patience even during progress. Patience prevents loss of direction. Success did not conclude their story. It revealed its depth. One final test remained: acceptance. Acceptance that growth does not always continue upward, that some seasons slow again. Support would need to remain steady even when momentum softened. Love would be asked to hold space without urgency. That final lesson would complete the meaning of support. Every journey eventually slows, not because something is lost, but because something has been understood. Love learns this lesson quietly. They noticed the change together. The urgency softened. The need to prove anything faded. Life no longer felt like something that needed to be chased. Earlier, love had carried uncertainty. Then it had carried pressure. Later, it had carried progress. Now, it carried acceptance. Acceptance is not surrender. It is clarity. They understood that growth is not endless acceleration. It moves in seasons: expansion, stability, rest. Support respects all three. He felt calmer now. Not because everything was complete, but because nothing needed to be forced. Love no longer asked, "What comes next?" It asked, "What matters now?" That question simplified their lives. They reduced excess, unnecessary commitments, unnecessary urgency. Support became quieter again, not less present, more integrated. They no longer spoke often about sacrifice, because sacrifice had become shared choice. Shared choices remove resentment. He reflected on the early days, the uncertainty, the waiting, the pressure he once carried alone. He realized how easily that weight could have broken connection. What saved it was not romance, but steadiness. Steadiness in response. Steadiness in presence, steadiness in belief without guarantees. Love had not demanded certainty. It had offered patience. Patience matured into trust. Trust matured into partnership. Partnership does not require constant affirmation. It requires reliability. They trusted each other's rhythm now, when to push, when to pause. Support had become intuitive, not calculated. He felt grateful for something rare, a love that did not measure worth by outcomes. Outcomes change. Support remains. They accepted that some dreams evolve, some plans adjust, some ambitions soften. Support allowed those changes without disappointment. Love learned to release expectations without losing commitment. Release is difficult. It feels like loss at first, but it often creates space. Space for peace, space for presence. They spent more time together quietly now, not discussing goals, sharing moments. Moments build memory more than milestones. He noticed how grounded he felt, not elevated, anchored. Anchors do not move quickly, they hold. Support had become an anchor, not holding him back, holding him steady. He understood something deeply now. Love is not strongest when it pushes, it is strongest when it holds. Holding does not mean stopping growth, it means guiding it safely. They faced slower seasons together without fear had lost its influence. Because trust had replaced it. Trust did not come from promises, it came from history. History of showing up, history of listening, history of adjusting without abandoning. That history mattered more than any future plan. Support no longer needed explanation. It was visible in behavior, in how they spoke, in how they waited, in how they allowed life to unfold. He realized love had changed him, not by motivating ambition, by stabilizing effort. Stability allowed consistency. Consistency shaped character. Character shaped choices. Choices shaped life. Love had influenced every step, even when it was silent. That silence was not absence, it was strength. They did not celebrate their journey loudly. They lived it quietly. Others might not notice, but they knew. Support does not seek recognition, it seeks continuity. Continuity builds resilience. Resilience sustains connection. They accepted that love would continue to evolve, not dramatically, gradually. Support would look different in future seasons, but its purpose would remain the same, to create space where growth does not feel lonely. He felt peace in that understanding. Peace is not the end of effort, it is the end of unnecessary struggle. Love had removed the struggle without removing responsibility. Responsibility felt lighter now, because it was shared. Shared responsibility strengthens bonds. They moved forward without hurry, without fear of falling behind. They understood something few people do. Love does not move life forward by force. It moves life forward by standing beside it. When love becomes support, it does not change the world. It changes how the world is faced, and that change is often enough. Their story did not end, it continued.